Hi, I'm Daniel Bordman, and this is Interrupted. Currently, we have no intro music, so me. There you go. As this is our first in-studio episode of Uninterrupted, you get the return of standard news reporter voice. Tonight, our top story, Justin Trudeau's summer of failure. Doug Ford has a big win at court. I can't keep this going much longer. Also, we have a Syrian refugee murders a young girl. Justin Trudeau finds this hilarious. Drama in the U.S. over the Supreme Court nomination, and a brutal murder in Israel is, of course, praised by the Palestinian government. So, there's many stories to get to tonight. I'm very excited. You see our new digs. I dressed up. Hopefully you did too. To all my Jewish friends, hopefully you had a easy fast. But first, a word from our new sponsor. So, some of you know the phrase, look good, feel good. But what if you could look terrible and do terrible? That's where I like to sell you our new product, Freeland Fashionista. So, some of you know Chrystia Freeland, our foreign minister, but what you don't know is she has a clothing line. And at Freeland Fashions, what we want to do is give you a great experience, all right? We sell dresses for just $29.99 a month. You can look exactly like Chrystia Freeland does right here. How it works, you pay us, and then you send us your exact dimensions, width, length, whatever. We look at those, ignore them completely, and give you something that is way too small. So, for just $29.99 a month, you could go around looking like an idiot. That is a great offer, and I highly recommend it. I use Chrystia Freeland Fashions all the time. And the way the product works is because the dress is way too small, you look ridiculous. And the key to the dress is, a lot of people know that you want to have blood rushing through your body, getting to your head, because blood brings oxygen to what the doctors call the brain, which enables you to think. But if you want to be a Liberal cabinet minister, thinking your thoughts is not great. So what the dress does is it cuts off oxygen flow and it helps you not think your thoughts. It is a great thing. I highly recommend it. It's great for ruining birthday parties, bar mitzvahs, weddings, or a great trade relationship with your closest trading ally. It is a fantastic thing. I use it all the time. I have no more friends left, and the Americans hate me. So that is just go to www.freelandfashions.com/this isn't a real advertisement, and for $29.99 a month, you can look like an absolute fool too. Use the promo code Daniel so they know we sent you, and if you join right now, in the next 10 minutes, we will throw in a real-life cardboard cutout of our Prime Minister, which says, because it's 2015, which is the reason why Chrystia Freeland is here in the first place. It's just like having the Prime Minister in your house, only a lot more articulate. All right, so on that note, let's get to our top story, which is Justin Trudeau's summer of failure. A brilliant term coined by Andrew Scheer. One of the few things that he does with some pizzazz is make fun of Justin Trudeau. And I think it's a great term. So let's give a good recap of what the summer of failure was, because Parliament's back in session. I think it's a great time to recap. Let's go from the earliest mess up to the latest. Some of you remember our tiff with Saudi Arabia. This is a this is a self-inflicted wound. This is just your general Justin Trudeau nonsense. If you don't remember, Chrystia Freeland's office, so again, our foreign minister, who somehow won Diplomat of the Year, she tweeted out, basically a hardline stance against Saudi Arabia. And what you need to know is they demanded the release of all political prisoners the second there was a quasi-feminist angle to this. Now, this is over mostly Raif Badawi, a famous activist. His sister was imprisoned along with other feminists, and they decided to call on the Saudis for an immediate release of all prisoners. Now, the thing you need to know is this is not how you do diplomacy. When Stephen Harper criticized the Saudis, what it is, you can condemn the Saudis for the treatment of human rights. And that's fine. That's how allies work things out. But when you try and force their hand to do something, that's when you get a backlash. Because the way Saudi Arabia works, it's Game of Thrones. All right? The political system, it's a closed democracy is the technical term. This means the royal family votes on who the next king is. It's all behind doors, so we don't know. Mohammed bin Salman, the heir apparent to the current king, he's sort of taking over. He's in the middle of a power struggle. And the only way to survive in Saudi Arabia is basically to be a strong man. He has to seem stronger than all the other Saudi princes if he's going to survive. And it doesn't look good when you have another country telling you to do specific foreign policies. So they demanded the release of prisoners instead of condemning the imprisonment. There's a big difference. They wanted the release of Raif Badawi, which I want as well, but this really ensured that Raif Badawi would not be released. Now, Raif Badawi's sentence is ridiculous. He got 10 years in prison for publicly criticizing Islam, also 1,000 lashes. It's a horrible thing, okay? I want Raif Badawi free. It's the right thing to do to call for his release. But it's a different thing to call for his release than to demand his release. And currently in the middle of the struggle, Saudi Arabia went from 0 to 11, shut down all Canadian trade, except they're going to still sell us oil because why not? And this also relates to our next thing, is how did he mess up that pipeline? So we're still buying Saudi oil because Canada hates Canadian oil. I have no logical explanation for this. But they took all their medical residents out of Canada. They basically stopped Saudi Arabia shot itself in the foot to shoot Canada in the foot. This is the epitome of cut off your nose to spite your face. So Justin Trudeau continued to fumble Saudi relations. We lost an important trading ally. Now, is it a strategic ally? Who knows what you can deem Saudi Arabia. So that was the first massive mess up for Justin Trudeau, is doing that Saudi Arabia. Then he stood strong and then sort of backed down by saying, hey, we're not going to capitulate, but he didn't really hit Saudi Arabia. And then he didn't do anything. He didn't hit back against Saudi Arabia at all, which led to other countries start to back Saudi Arabia. Pakistan backed Saudi Arabia, the Palestinian Authority backed Saudi Arabia, all the Arab allies and Gulf Coast countries backed Saudi Arabia over Canada, because that's how diplomacy works in the Middle East. As most of you know, the Middle East is not Manitoba. Someone please write your local MP and let the Liberal Party know this. But what happened is, because they saw Canada was weak and Canada would not hit back against Saudi Arabia, they figured, okay, if I back Canada, the Saudis are going to hit me, and if I back Saudi Arabia, the Canadians will do nothing. So all the countries took Saudi Arabia's side. We couldn't even get back. It took the EU like a whole month to tacitly endorse Canada's position. The United States wouldn't back us because they really hate Chrystia Freeland for good reason. So we completely messed up our Middle East relations. Now, I have a theory that this has a lot to do with Trudeau's love of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is currently in a proxy war with Saudi Arabia and Yemen. Right in the middle of this happening, you had IRGC generals in Iran go on TV and say they were actively ordering Houthi rebels to fire on Saudi Arabian ships. Justin Trudeau is famous for his love of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So I am of the opinion that that had a lot to do with the riff than just a simple tweet. So that was the first major mess up, the first failure. The second massive failure, what you call second, NAFTA or the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Let's go to NAFTA. So, North American Free Trade Agreement. It is the lifeblood of the Canadian North American economy. It is very important. Now, a lot of people know, if you have passed the first grade in this country, you probably know there are 3 countries in North America: Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Over $2 billion worth of trade goes between the Canadian and US border daily. That is a lot of money. Donald Trump is famous for his hatred of NAFTA because I know the most about trade and we have terrible deals, horrible deals, NAFTA is a bad deal. I'm of the opinion that Trump doesn't really know what he's talking about when he rambles on about trade, but he just likes rhetoric. So the first mess up on NAFTA came when, well, this is a replay. Our good old friend Chrystia Freeland from Freeland Fashions, for just $29.99 a month, you can look like an idiot too. What she did, the first mess up of NAFTA negotiations, is when Chrystia Freeland was accepting Diplomat of the Year award in Washington, flies down to Washington in the middle of NAFTA negotiations, gets up to the stage in Washington and rips Trump for being a dictator and all that, and then Trump says, screw it, and she's widely hated in the American administration. Justin Trudeau at the time was pushing for a gender-neutral NAFTA, and they just said, screw it, tariffs, we're walking away. Then they got us back to the table. This time, Justin Trudeau didn't need a minister to screw up NAFTA for him. He did it himself. Rumors are that they actually had good relations with Trump. They met and they had talked about some things. We actually got some good concessions on the sunset clause and all that. And then Justin Trudeau got on TV and famously said, we're not going to be pushed around by Donald Trump. Not knowing that Donald Trump watches a lot of TV and has a bit of a fragile ego, Donald Trump then said, screw you, Canada's out. Then he went to go negotiate the NAFTA agreement with Mexico. And Canada refused to renegotiate NAFTA out of their loyalty to the other countries in NAFTA. Now, If you're with me, you know the other countries in NAFTA would be Mexico. All right? Canada, United States, Mexico. 3 countries. Then the United States starts negotiating with Mexico. Justin Trudeau still would not get into negotiations with them out of his loyalty to the other NAFTA countries, which begs the question, does the Prime Minister know how to count to 3? I'm still waiting. Obviously, he didn't. NAFTA is now the United States-Mexico trade deal, and Canada essentially got pushed around. We got pushed around. NAFTA negotiations are going on now. We're in panic mode. Krista Freeland is spending most of her time presumably negotiating NAFTA, but then, because I don't understand how she did this. It makes no. I don't get it. I want to run my head through this desk. She got on stage in Toronto in the middle of NAFTA negotiations. She flies back to Toronto to attend a conference of Taming the Tyrant, where Donald Trump is compared to the modern-day dictators like Erdogan and his crew and Xi Jinping in China. There's a montage where you see goose-stepping Nazi fascists juxtaposed with Trump supporters. Do you think this is going to help NAFTA negotiations, Christia? Please email me right now and just explain how this is a good strategy. This is the diplomat of the year, apparently, because it's 2015. So we completely fumbled NAFTA negotiations. Now NAFTA is the United States-Mexico trade agreement featuring Canada, maybe. So that's our economy down the drains. And then, to cap it all off, the biggest failure of all, the Trans Mountain Pipeline. A pipeline that all the approvals have been done by the Conservative government. It was just really Obama administration holding it back on the American end. Trump comes in, and then for some reason we can't get any pipelines built. Energy East is screwed up. Vancouver goes NDP. That messes up the entire country. But it turns out, because Trudeau did such a good job of driving foreign investment out of the country, Keystone Pipeline builders said, screw this, we're out of Canada. We don't want to be here. In order to save the project, they paid $4.5 billion for something that should have been free. We were going to have a free pipeline. Instead, it cost us $4.5 billion. To cap that off, not only do we pay $4.5 billion for a pipeline, turns out we can't even use it because it gets shut down by the courts. Apparently the courts have ruled that we didn't have meaningful consultations with the indigenous people. Whatever. We can get into that later. I've heard a lot of things about how Trudeau deals with the Aboriginals. So we can't even get it. So he bought a pipeline that he pretty much knew he wouldn't be able to get built, alienating everyone because the radical left was like, pipelines are evil. We need to buy our oil from Saudi Arabia where there's an equal chance of an environmental disaster, but women also get decapitated for speaking their mind because that's where we need our oil, from a brutal dictatorship. So instead of getting Canadian oil to Tidewater or into the American market, we have nothing. We just have a $4.5 billion blueprint because the Prime Minister sucks at his job. So that is the summer of failure. It was then capped off when a Liberal MP defected across party lines, I believe Leona Asalev. She joined the Conservatives. Now, you watch the CBC's coverage of this, and I watched enough CBC to make me, again, want to drive my head through a wall. And they were somehow, I love let's bring on a power panel for diverse opinions. Let's get 4 liberals, and we'll see if they can all say the same opinion together. They tried blaming again Stephen Harper for this failure. I don't know how. So then he was capped off because a Liberal MP defected. And this is good news for Andrew Scheer, who is facing a strong challenge from Maxime Bernier and his People's, the People's Party of Canada. We'll talk about that later and what it will do to Trudeau's chances and Scheer's chances. But Scheer actually had a big win coming out. He did very good marketing the summer of failure, which is an abject failure. And then he sort of stole thunder on the first day when after summer vacation. By the way, why do people in Parliament get summer vacation? They make 6 figures a year. Why do they get summers off? Why? I get 2 weeks. You get 2 weeks off. That should be it. And people are mad that Doug Ford's reducing the size of City Council. All right. So Leona Asalev crosses the line, and people's, maybe it's a personal political calculated move. Her explanation is she didn't feel like her voice was being heard in the concerns for this economy. Yeah, no duh, Justin Trudeau doesn't listen. And people are saying, hey, she's just doing this to keep her seat because it is very likely in the next election that the riding she's in Richmond Hill will go blue. It went hard blue in for Doug Ford in his election. She won by 2 points in the big red wave that was 2015 for Justin Trudeau. So is there maybe a political calculation here? Maybe. Is this a principled decision? Maybe. I would have loved if she just said, hey, I joined the Liberal Party because I believed in the values of like John Chrétien and Paul Martin, and Justin Trudeau is not that. Justin Trudeau is a vapid ideologue, and seeing how the sausage is made in the Liberal Party made me realize that the real Liberals are the Conservatives, so ethically I joined the Conservative Party. If she had said that, then I don't think there'd be any questions, and that would be a much stronger thing. But here she sort of gets promoted to a sort of shadow minister position to be critic instead of being a backbencher. She bumps her own political profile, and she'll probably win again in the next election. All being said, is she a sleazy politician? They all are. Is this good for Justin Trudeau? No. Is it good for Andrew Scheer? Yes. Did he need it? Yes. So he stole Justin Trudeau's thunder on the first day back to school. Good for Andrew Scheer. Now, if Andrew Scheer can just do something a bit spicy, then maybe he has a chance of staving off this Bernier comeback. So that is a summer of failure. Absolute failures. Canada is on the brink of economic crisis. We're really being held up by cannabis stocks right now, which I'll go into another time, but like the cannabis stocks keep going up, but it's a complete bubble because the bubble's going to burst because for the first 6 months you can only order online and in mail, and I'm not sure if you know many stoners, but how many stoners are like, excuse me, Mary, I was thinking we should get stoned 3.5 weeks from now. How about October 15th? Should we get stoned then? Yes, I will put in order with the government. October 15th, we will get high. That's not really how most stoners operate. People who do drugs tend to go out to people and buy drugs because they're like, I want drugs now. So you could see a big crash in the Canadian economy after weed is legalized. You'll see an initial bump, but expect a bit of a dip in. I'm calling a dip in the TSX once people realize, oh, stoners don't like ordering weed 3 weeks in advance. That's not a great economic model. Who would have thought the government could mess something up? All right, speaking of less government, my boy Doug Ford. Doug Ford just had a big win in court today. The Ontario Court of Appeals granted a stay on the court decision. So what this means is they basically overruled the judge's decision, which was a horrendous decision. It was poorly decided. Basically, they said he ruled that it violated the charter rights. It doesn't, 2B, which is the freedom of expression clause. The judge said Doug Ford slashing city council from 47 to 25 violates your freedom of expression because the political candidates had already made flyers and had a website. Because we all know websites can never be changed and flyers can never be reprinted. So it was a horrendous decision. Good on the Supreme Court, the Ontario Court of Appeals to knock that down. What this means is, for now, the notwithstanding clause will not be invoked. So Doug Ford technically has not invoked the notwithstanding clause. If you watch my show a lot, you know that I was actually in favor of invoking it. It is, as the Conservatives have been saying, whacking a fly with a sledgehammer. But I think it is a good thing to do because you already have a bunch of nonsense legal challenges to the Doug Ford government. The Ontario's teacher union and all this. Listen, the provincial government, according to our constitution and the way it's set up, has rights over education. He ran on it, and there's already 3 legal challenges to him reforming the sex ed curriculum. I'm sorry, but that is absolute nonsense. And it is good that finally a Conservative said, hey, I will use the notwithstanding clause to bypass all this, tomfoolery in the court system. I know if you want more time, yes, it's good to fight these battles in court, but if you remember, in Toronto, what City Council did to Rob Ford is there was a scandal where Rob Ford, after he won the mayoral election as upcoming mayor, like mayor incumbent, he used the letterhead of Mayor of Toronto in a fundraising letter to write people about raising money for a football team. Okay, that is as CNN would call a nothing burger. The nothing burger of all nothing burgers, but because they found an activist judge who just didn't like Rob Ford, they managed to take him out of mayor office for a couple of days before it was overturned by a court of appeals. And it's a good thing that Doug Ford has actually said, hey, you want to try these silly legal challenges to activist judges? We're not going to play that game. You have to, only reasonable things will be done. I love it because this means that if the left wants to challenge Doug Ford, they actually have to do it on reasonable grounds. You can't just look for a judge who loves terrorist Omar Carter and say, hey, you like Omar Carter, you must hate Doug Ford too. It's great. So City Council size will be slashed from 47 to 25, most likely. And if you want the argument for why this is good, here's the political argument. Now, We could talk about the timing of it not being great, but in municipal politics, the strongest voices are always special interest groups. It is, we need a, transgender bike lane for the disabled, or we need, anti-abortion pills for whatever. It's usually special interest things dominate municipal politics. And when politicians are hit with special interests, usually the path of least resistance for a city politician is just to capitulate to special interest groups because no one cares about low-level municipal politics, only special interest thing. So the path of least resistance is to just usually capitulate. When you reduce the size of council, and you have 25, it means more special interest groups have to compete for the same politician, which changes the political calculus, meaning that the path of least resistance would now be to sort of listen to none of them to not make the others upset. Because if you listen to one, you're going to make some special interest group a lot of upset, and you're going to have to deal with a lot of nonsense. So the easy thing for politicians now becomes ignore the special interest in more ways. Also, when you have 25 people instead of 47, it means each councillor has more public image, and if there is a scandal or something, or they don't do things you like, it's more likely to get noticed. So I think that's good. Also, these are the same idiots who, whenever there's a Leafs home opener or the Raptors have a playoff game, there's signal maintenance on the TTC. Because who needs to use the TTC on the day the Leafs home opener is there? It's absolute nonsense. So we don't need more city council. If only Doug Ford had just put this in the campaign promises, it would have been good. Doug, if we go back in time, he should have just said, yeah, we're going to reduce the size of Toronto City Council. He wasn't going to win Toronto Centre anyway. He might even get more votes in Toronto because, again, people hate politicians because politicians suck. And that's a very reasonable analysis there. So Doug Ford gets a big win. It is a good thing because I feel the biggest threat to democracy is a super legislature within the court system. And that's why you see there's a big Supreme Court drama, which we'll get into next. And the drama of the Supreme Court really shows the way North American politics have shifted. We're now starting to view the courts as this sort of legislative system, right? Gay marriage went through the courts instead of the legislature. Drugs are going through the courts instead of the legislature. None of this is good because the legislature should make laws, and then the court should decide if those laws are constitutional. That is an appropriate check and balance. But this line's starting to be blurred because you have judges who are starting to sort of write decisions, and you saw this on Trump's so-called Muslim ban, where some judge in Hawaii says there's an Egyptian man whose grandmother lives in Syria, and she was upset, so we can't have this. And you're like, that's not a legal ground. But then that takes months and months and months going through the legal system, and it's a big ridiculous thing. You can't have legislation coming out of the courts because there is no check to that. That would create a super legislature which would concentrate all the powers within a tight group of unelected, what is the term, unelected judges. Yeah, you can't have that. You can't have that. So that is a big win for Doug Ford. I am happy with Doug Ford. He is doing great right now. All right, Supreme Court drama. So Brett Kavanaugh is the Supreme Court nomination. He will be confirmed because if you remember back in, 2014, Harry Reid and the Democrats invoked what is called the nuclear option and basically said the Supreme Court justices can be confirmed by just a standard majority within the Senate, which means if the Republicans control the Senate, they can basically put in whoever they want. So Kavanaugh had his hearing, and a letter was sent to Dianne Feinstein, the head of the Senate Judiciary Committee for the Democrats, in July. She held on to this letter until about a week ago, and the letter alleges a pretty brutal rape or attempted rape from Brett Kavanaugh and another famous conservative judge. And what she alleges is that at a party, they had kept her in a room, and Brett Kavanaugh had held her down and put his hand over her mouth and tried to take off her clothes, and then she managed to escape and tried to scream for help and run away. And here's where things get a bit iffy. It doesn't look like a credible accusation, one, because the way Dianne Feinstein handled it. If this is a very serious thing, why wasn't it brought up earlier? Why weren't we talking about this in July? Why aren't we talking about it, during his confirmation hearing? They wait for after the hearing to be over and then sort of throw this in as a last-minute move. It looks kind of fishy that way. It looks to the outside eye that Dianne Feinstein looked at it, didn't see it as too credible, but just wanted to throw it in as a last-minute Hail Mary before it can be discredited. Another thing is both people in the room have come up with very, very strong denials. Brett Kavanaugh's offered to appear in court and go on the record for this. That's a very, very strong denial, which looks good on his part. The other thing is there are conflicting reports on her story. like, so with the Roy Moore thing, one of the things is there are multiple women, which looks good for the women. The Roy Moore thing is more believable because, again, multiple women came forward. They were able to give details that corroborated their story. They said, this happened here at this time. And then people were able to go back and say, yes, Roy Moore was in that court at that time on that day. The records corroborate their story. So that looks good again for the accusers. This accuser, though, she has given no date, no time, no way to even deny this because it just happened when she was 15, she says. Now, we also have she went to an independent psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist has the incident occurring in her late teens, which is a contradiction. Then they have, she says she attended couples therapy in 2012, where there is no name in there, which isn't the most uncommon thing, but she says the alleged incident happened with 4 men in the room. So 2 or 4 men, this is purely off of her testimony. She said she didn't talk about it to anyone in 2012, so this is something that would never hold up in a court of law. 1, the statute of limitations already passed. 2, there are no corroborating details. And 3, there are a lot of inconsistencies in major details of the story, and it's a purely he said, she said incident. From my personal perspective, this seems like a very, very brutal accusation. If this really did happen, if he did hold a girl down and forcibly try and rape her, that is a horrendous thing. He should not be on he should lose his job and go to jail for this. It's horrible if it's true. With things like this, though, I would have been more likely to believe it if it was sort of an accusation of drunken tomfoolery, like, hey, he was pretty drunk and he groped me and said, hey, come on, baby, and put his hand around me and was inappropriate and tried to kiss me, and I said no. That you can believe as a one-time mistake, but, brutally holding a woman down and putting your hand over her mouth, that sounds like a pathological rapist to me, which those people are usually repeat offenders. For a story like that, you would expect another woman to come forward and say, yes, he has a pattern of doing this, he did it to me too. So could it have happened? Maybe. Is it likely to have happened? From the way it's presented, it doesn't seem likely. And the timing is quite auspicious on the Democrats' part. So you're gonna see poor coverage of this again from the CNN, Washington Post, whatever. They're gonna say, oh, alleged rapist Brett Kavanaugh confirmed by Republicans. They don't care about sexual assault. Can I remind you about Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton? Bill Clinton basically sexually assaulting all the interns. And most of the interns having a story of that Hillary would come up to them after they were raped and basically threaten them and say, hey, you shut up or else. No, that's all fine. That we don't believe. That we don't believe, but whenever it comes to a last-minute accusation against a Supreme Court Republican justice, that we must believe. Must believe there. So could it have happened? Maybe. Did it happen? I seem unlikely. Is the media covering this responsibly? No one's really taking a responsible side. You see in the Washington Post article, they say she passed a polygraph. Polygraphs aren't admissible at court. They're easy to beat. A polygraph is basically, it's just a heart monitor, and when you know that, you're more likely to beat it. It's not a lie detector. It just detects your heart rate, really. And it kind of works in shadows, so you can beat a polygraph. Also, the question they asked her on the polygraph was not, is this story true? They heard her story, recapped it to her, and said, is this retelling of your story accurate? And she said yes. Which means, as you all know, last night there was a horrible alien invasion, the planet was in danger, but I used my kung fu skills to beat up all the aliens and save planet Earth. And then when I went on the mothership and punched the alien overlord in the face, they used that neuralizer thing from Men in Black, which erased all your memories of it, which is why I'm the only one who remembers the alien invasion. Now, is this story true? If I was under a polygraph, the way you'd find out if that's true or not is say, is that story true? What the Washington Post did is they recapped my story. So I said the story, then they would have said, so last night you fought off an alien invasion with your kung fu skills. Is that an accurate depiction of your story? And I said yes, and it comes out clean. Does that mean the story is true, or does that mean that you accurately summarized my story? So there's a lot of irresponsibility here, and of course a lot of partisanship, and it's just the way it is. So that's the level of journalism we're dealing with. So be very careful on how you read these stories. Try not to read headlines and bylines. The Washington Post usually at paragraph 4 is when they start to tell the story, and you got to kind of read through the whole thing and sort of comb through it with, oh, what really happened. All right. So another big news. There was an interview with Justin Trudeau on Maclean's the other day, and he did not come across well. So some of you know there was a story where a 13-year-old girl, Marissa Shen in BC, was brutally murdered by what looks like a Syrian refugee, one of the Syrians that Justin Trudeau brought in. She was raped, murdered, and left in the park. Some of us, 99% of us, think this is a horrible tragedy. One of us found this hilarious, absolutely hilarious. Justin Trudeau, in an interview with Maclean's, when asked about this, laughed twice in the middle of the interview. Basically gave the response, well, you know, it's quite horrible, and we just have these things, but it happens in Canada, and sometimes, like, laughed twice, and it was like, really? This is the guy who, after the hijab hoax happened, was nearly in tears. Absolute tears. I can't believe that a girl almost had her hair cut by scissors. And again, here's a good thing to bring up. So both of the victims in the hijab hoax and this came from the East Asian community. I say the East Asian community were the victims because the hijab hoax girl, she lied and said it was an Asian man, and of course the Asian community was not too happy that they were just thrown under the bus as these crazy Islamophobes. But we had international condemnation of the hijab hoax. It made it to European news, American news. CNN had it. Justin Trudeau was in front of a camera like that. There was a press conference at the school, which is a horrible thing to do if it was true. But did anyone even read the story? So the hijab hoax was a man, an Islamophobe, an evil Islamophobe, came up to an 11-year-old girl wearing a hijab and wanted to cut her hijab off with a pair of scissors. Even if this was true, that is not a case of Islamophobia. That's clearly mental illness. It would be Islamophobic if he assaulted the girl, but that's clearly someone not in their right mind trying to cut off a girl's hijab with scissors. Like, that would be a sort of a psychotic episode from someone who needs help. Yes, he should hypothetically go to, you know, a criminal mental institution. But immediately, this is Islamophobia. The Prime Minister, the Premier, everyone needs to weigh in on the hijab hoax. Justin Trudeau's nearly in tears at the level of Islamophobia and how evil Canada is. But for this, a 13-year-old Asian girl is murdered. Can't get a statement to the Prime Minister. He laughs it off. Another horrible thing is there was a interview. They're interviewing protesters. And a woman is protesting, talking to the CBC. And there's a clip of this online. Go look at it. You can see, the amazing thing is there's a CBC microphone this woman's talking into, and then the lady talking gets coffee thrown in her face by a woman wearing a hijab who walks away. That's an assault. And why wasn't this on national news? Right? This is an assault that happened on TV. Like, we know the national news broadcaster has the footage. Like, the CBC logo is literally in the video. This is an assault that happened right in front of the media. There are videos of it, there are pictures of it, yet we can't track down the assailant here. And the Asian community is rightly upset because they're starting to learn that you're the new Jews. And by what I mean by that is, to the left, is you sometimes get our sympathy, but you're at the bottom of the line because you're doing too well. You need to sit in the back of the social justice bus. And the East Asians are currently learning this. Basically, none of the things that are important to the community, education across the country is dropping. Our test scores are horrendous. Math skills, English skills, declining rapidly. You can see this, less than half kids can pass the standard math and literacy tests in our province. We're teaching the kids social justice. Literally, Ontario's new curriculum is titled Social Justice Begins With Me. It focuses on critical theory and unlearning. Yes, the Ontario curriculum put in by Kathleen Wynne focuses on unlearning different things. Of course, you're unlearning ableism, anti-Semitism, racism. Heteronormality is something we need to unlearn, which again brings up, does the left love, I thought they loved science. Now, I'm pro-gay rights, you know, marry a transgender dude on a scooter. I don't care, you know, love is love, let it be, let it be. But can we all just be honest for a second and say that heterosexuality is the default human sexuality, right? Some of you may know that babies, when a mom and dad love each other very much, they come together and they make a baby. You know, gay couples cannot have a baby unless there's a female egg being sent in artificial fertilization. The standard default mode for human beings is heterosexuality. Nothing wrong with homosexuality. You know, you want to be a gender, pan, queer, whatever, go for it. You're a unicorn, be special. Just don't force me to do anything that I don't want to do. That's the whole thing. But our curriculum focuses on unlearning heteronormality. What the hell does that mean? Are we going to teach the kids that the standard is non-binary? There is no gender? Well, That's what the sex ed curriculum is. So this is why Doug Ford got elected. This is, again, one of the big reasons why I personally am a Doug Ford supporter. It is stop the carbon tax, which is a tax on everything. The carbon tax is more likely to save ISIS than a tree. And education reform. We are focusing on indoctrination, not education. That is the two big things that need to be done. If he does those two things, I say, I will build a statue of Doug Ford and put it on Kathleen Wynne's lawn, and we can all have a great time. So back to the East Asian community. They're starting to learn that the only thing that the left really backs the East Asian community on is representation in the media. We need more Asian people in Hollywood, as if that's a real problem for anyone. Things that usually matter to most communities, not just East Asians, education, getting a good job, getting a good family. These are the reasons why people come to Canada, right? That's the deal. Because if you work really hard in China, you might get an extra bowl of rice, maybe. If you work hard in Canada, you can get a good job, a stable family, and a happy life. Like that's the sell to you. That's why people come to Canada. And this is why Doug Ford crushed the minority vote in the recent election, because he went to the immigrants and said, hey, we're going to lower your taxes and get you good jobs. And they're like, yeah, that's why I came to Canada. And then the Liberals came and was like, do you want extra genders? And they're like, what are you talking about? Well, we have a gender for you, and then you get a gender, and you get a gender, and you get a gender, social justice. And they're like, what the hell are you talking about, Doug Ford? So the East Asians are starting to learn that the only people they can complain about, like the Jews now, are evil, evil white men. So evil. That's the only thing. But if a Syrian refugee murders your children, don't talk about it. If a social justice activist or Black Lives Matter wants to vandalize Chinatown because Chinatown's racist, can't talk about it. They're right. It's the hierarchy of victimology, and East Asians are pretty low on the bottom. I'm not sure if they're tied with us Jews. Either way, welcome to the bottom of the rung. I hope you leave soon. So this is absolutely repugnant behavior from Trudeau. He laughs this off. I don't know how you find this rape and murder hilarious. When 13-year-old girls are murdered, that's usually a horrendous action. It would serve the Prime Minister well to be contrite, to sort of, be apologetic, sort of acknowledge that, hey, there are problems with bringing in too many refugees, and we need a balance. Like, we need to integrate them. We need to focus on integration. That would be a great thing for him to say. No, instead, no problems. No problems with the refugee system, and this brutal murder is hilarious. Hilarious stuff. All right. Speaking of brutal murders, let's move to Israel now. Where Ari Fluid, who is a big Zionist, big pro-Israel activist, he made a lot of videos. He was murdered by a Palestinian terrorist in Judea and Samaria, or the West Bank. There's a video of this. What happened is a Palestinian terrorist went up to him, stabbed him in the back, and then with the knife still in his back, he went on to go kill more people in a market. Ari Fluid basically grabs his gun with a knife in his back and took out the terrorist before he killed more people. Collapsed, an ambulance was called, but he died on the scene or on the way to the hospital. So he dies a hero. Now, this is the standard media lies on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Palestinian government, of course, is ecstatic. They love this. They support the murderer. They throw out a message of support. He's not a terrorist. He's a martyr for the cause. And here's where it affects you in Canada, the United States, Europe, wherever you're watching this from. If you're a part of a Western country, what you do not know is your tax dollars will go to pay this terrorist. You will pay for his family. He gets a stipend from the Palestinian Authority or Hamas. If it's in the West Bank, that's Palestinian Authority. If it's in Gaza, it's Hamas. And your tax dollars will go to this man's family to reward him specifically for committing this murder. The more brutal the murder is, the more money you get. There's a whole system. It's what they call the Martyrs Fund. It is a big sticking issue in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Palestinians get tons of international aid, not from Trump administration anymore. This is why Donald Trump is cutting aid to the Palestinian Authority, because they use American, Canadian, and European dollars to incentivize terrorism. They have an actual policy. They're allowed to do it openly because Zionism, something, evil Zionists, Jews, Zionists, who knows? So your tax dollars will finance these type of murders. This murderer will be promoted with your tax dollars. His family will be funded with your tax dollars in order to promote more people to commit more murders that, again, will be paid for and financed by, advertised with your tax dollars. This is why UNRWA should be completely defunded. International aid also doesn't lead to a better result. I've covered this before, but the Palestinian refugees, they've been refugees since 1948. We can talk about, and they're different than refugees. The Palestinian refugees do not fit the legal definition of refugees. It's basically anyone who had any relative live within the current Israeli territory for 2 years between 1919 and 1949. Like, it's an absolutely ridiculous characterization. It makes no sense. It's purely political. But this is why it doesn't work. Like, Palestinian refugees get 4 times more funding than the standard refugee, yet they've been refugees for 70 years and nothing happens. Why? Because this money just goes to promoting more terrorism and keeping the Palestinians in these little refugee camps so the Palestinian leaders can continue to make more money off all this international aid. It's silly, it's ridiculous, every fluid dies a hero, and of course, the Palestinian government is in massive support of this murder, and this is why the Israelis don't believe them when they go up in front of the UN and say, we believe in peace. So when they speak English, we believe in peace and love and whatever. Then they turn around and speak in Arabic, death to the Jews, we're going to kill them all. Then the March to Return, the leader of the Hamas government during this great March to Return, which is peaceful, literally says in Arabic, he goes in English, yes, this is a peaceful protest, blah, blah, blah. Then in Arabic goes, we're going to cross the border, we're going to go into Israel, and we're going to tear their hearts out. This is why we shouldn't give these people money to do this. When you finance something, you're more likely to incentivize it. Subsidies encourage behavior. Taxes discourage behavior. So when you subsidize murder and terrorism, you get more murder and terrorism. Also, for the record, murder and terrorism are bad and you should not subsidize them. On that note, let's get a word from our other sponsor. So, some of you love working or don't like working. Some of you work a job, you do it well, you don't do it well. How would you like to have a job where you do it terribly but everyone loves you? That's why you need this brand new product called Barack Obama. I highly recommend Barack Obama for all your needs. So how does this work? You have a job, but you want everyone to like you. How would you like to be terrible at your job but have everyone love you? That's where you need Barack Obama. For just $9.99 a month, you can get Barack Obama and everyone will love you for no particular reason. Let's say you have a situation. There is a terrorist cell in your basement. All right, they're thriving. What are you going to do? Kill them? Call the cops? Get rid of them? Silly. You need to find a way to subsidize that terrorist cell so one day they could take over your neighborhood and you can blame it on someone else and have everyone love you. This is an absolutely fantastic product. I highly recommend it. So for just $9.99 a month, go to www.hezbollah.com, and just for $9.99 a month, you can be like Barack Obama too. And again, if you order right now, we will throw in a Nobel Peace Prize just for signing up. They come that easily. So for $9.99 a month, you could do it. Now, I don't advertise any product I don't use myself. Barack Obama is a fantastic product. I've been using Barack Obama for 2.5 years now, and it's great. Half my neighbors are currently flying ISIS flags. My wife has been decapitated and lit on fire, and everyone loves me. So again, just go to www.hezbollah.com/this isn't a real advertisement, and for $9.99 a month, you can be exactly like Barack Obama. Promo code Daniel so they know that we sent you. And again, you order right now, and you get a Nobel Peace Prize just for signing up. How great is that? I highly recommend it. Go for it. All right. So, moving on back to Canada. Maxime Bernier. So, Maxime Bernier, when you leave a political party like Leona Aslev did, there's a way to leave it, and there's a way to leave it in style. And Bernier did it in style. Leona Aslev went, I tried to bring my concerns to the government and my principles say. Maxime Bernier said, the dairy industry is stupid. We subsidize supply management. It's ridiculous. We pay way too much to subsidize these farmers, and somehow Canadian dairy is more expensive. How do we pay millions of dollars a year to make things more expensive? This makes no sense. Screw you, screw you, screw you. I'm gone. Started his own party. Now that's how you leave with style. So Maxime Bernier is under the impression that he's going to be Prime Minister in 2019. It will not happen. And is he going to play spoiler vote? Is he going to merge with the Libertarians? We don't know. So news coming out this week that he's, recently actually, that he's working on a merger with the Libertarian Party. This would give him sort of the infrastructure to run as a political party, the ability to fundraise as a political party right away. It's a way to make noise and sort of, kick Andrew Scheer in the balls in 2019. This is the big pseudo, we'll call it the danger for the Conservative Party heading into 2019 is, will Maxime Bernier split the vote? We had this before with the Reform Party and the Progressive Conservatives. Now people are saying, you know, it's a lot different than the Reform Party. The Reform Party basically got big off the fear of Western alienation. It was big in the West because, if you remember Pierre Elliott Trudeau, he just ripped on Western Canada all the time. He basically, well, if you see Justin Trudeau, his father wasn't much different for the energy industry. Horrible prime minister for the Canadian economy, but he pirouetted, danced around the Queen, and looked cool. So Bernier's path to victory is he needs to be seen as a non-protest vote because, people like me, I support Max. I hate supply management. He's 100% right about supply management. He is 200% right about Trudeau's cult of diversity. As I've said before, diversity is not our strength. Decency is our strength. Diversity is result. I do not like this diversity as strength argument because it inverts cause and effect, and that's dangerous. And Maxime Bernier sort of elaborated on this. And the way I find this to be a bad statement is when you say diversity is our strength, you know, what does that mean? It's usually just a vapid sentiment, but it should be that. And the example I give is, let's say you have a hockey team. They're all black. You have a basketball team, one kid of every race. Every night the hockey team after their games does community service for 2 hours and walks old ladies across the street. The basketball team goes out and commits crimes. They have a street gang and they punch old ladies in the face or whatever. Now, who's better? The basketball team or the hockey team? The hockey team, even though they're racially homogenous. Let's say one of the black kids on the hockey team moves out of town and he's replaced with a white kid. But they still do the same things every night. Have they gotten better? Has adding a white person made them better people? No, if they do the same things, they're the same people, right? They're more diverse, but their strength is their decency. This is the danger. Because when you just throw out these vapid platitudes, it brings back the argument, because people know it's wrong intuitively. Diversity is not our strength. People start saying diversity is our weakness, which is equally as wrong. So in order to prevent this, I think Trudeau loves dividing the country on these lines because he thinks ideologically he can win these arguments. But what we really need to stress, and good on Andrew Scheer for sort of jumping on the bandwagon here, is diversity is not our strength. We are a decent society. A decent society is one that measures people by the content of their character, and anyone can be a good person in a decent society. Black, white, brown, whatever, whoever you are, where you're from, decent people treat people as individuals. That decency, or as Andrew Scheer calls it, freedom, either one, that is our strength, and decent societies allow diversity to flourish, right? Just because a society is diverse doesn't make it decent. Like Iran is quite diverse ethnically. The Islamic Republic of Iran is a very diverse society. However, their weakness is they have a horrible regime run by the Ayatollah who is oppressing all the people. But they're very diverse. Well, they also murder lots of people. Highest rate of execution in the world. And they also execute the most children. Fun fact, if you are a woman in Iran, they do not execute virgin women. So if you are a young woman on death row in Iran, what they do is they marry you to a prison guard, so you are then raped and then murdered. That is but is diversity their strength? But they're very diverse. Isn't that a strong? No. See? Things are a lot more complicated than hapless platitudes. So Bernier needs to be seen as a non-protest vote, but I'm quite happy. I support Maxime Bernier, and I might join his party in 2019, but Bernier is wrong when he says that the Conservatives are just like Justin Trudeau. Justin Trudeau is a complete aberration. He is not like Andrew Scheer. These are two different people. If you cannot see the difference between Andrew Scheer and Justin Trudeau, yes, Andrew Scheer is in bed with the dairy industry. Yes, that's bad. Yes, we should get rid of supply management. But honestly, everyone, Maxime Bernier isn't going to win. If I could talk you off the ledge, like, we have refugees from America, the richest country in the world, coming into Canada and being put up in hotels. Refugees from America. How do we have an immigration crisis? Canada is the only place in the world that is geographically immune to an immigration crisis. To our west is a giant ocean. No one lives in the ocean. To our east, another giant ocean. To our north, an ocean and just frozen tundra. There is nothing. To our south is the richest country in the history of the world. We are immune to an immigration crisis, yet we have one. All right? Andrew Scheer and Michelle Rempel have been quite specific that they will close the third-party loophole. There are many good reasons to vote Conservative. Yes, I love Maxime Bernier hectoring the Conservative Party and forcing them to the right, but if he was smart, he'd run it as an independent and then really say, I'm going to win in 2023, and then really push the Conservative Party to the right, because he runs the risk of, if he loses in 2019, which he will, he'll run out of steam and be seen as a joke in 2023. If he was serious about running, he would sort of prime himself for a 2023 run, not so much a 2019 run. That's the Maxime Bernier thing there. All right. Another thing, speaking of Iran, we have the Democrats are negotiating on behalf of the Islamic Republic of Iran. That's hilarious. So in the midst of all this Russia collusion, Trump's a Russian spy, you have John Kerry, openly meeting with Javad Zarif, the Joseph Goebbels of the Iran right now. And they're talking, they're best friends, and John Kerry is really trying to undermine American interests. It's just hilarious to watch the open collusion between the Democratic Party and a terrorist regime in Iran while complaining about the Russian conspiracy theory, which, listen, I hate Trump's rhetoric on Russia. I really hated it during the election campaign. Should we be soft on Russia? No. Russia is a country run by a strongman dictator. They went into Georgia just to flex their muscle in 2006, I believe. They annexed Crimea, again, because Barack Obama was weak on Russia, and they started a war in Ukraine. You cannot give a lot of leeway to this government. And to Trump's credit, he has been very strong on Russia in policy. Horrible on rhetoric, but strong on policy, which is the more important thing. Americans, they've armed Ukrainian rebels, which Obama didn't do. They have actually used American munitions on Russian mercenaries in Syria, which Obama wouldn't do. So, and thankfully he has not recognized Crimea, the annexation of Crimea, which Barack Obama didn't do either, so I'm not going to blame him for that. But if you remember the Russian collusion story, I was old enough to remember in 2012 when there is a hot mic take where Barack Obama is literally caught on a hot mic with Dmitry Medvedev, the Prime Minister of Russia, saying he will give the Russians more flexibility, and he's just lying to the American people because it's the last election, and after the election, he'll have more flexibility, so don't worry. He says, I will transmit this to Vladimir. And then after the election, and after that, they have flexibility, and they go into Ukraine and they annex Crimea. Where is the collusion? Where is the collusion story? It's just so funny. Now, again, terrible rhetoric, but good policy. And that's the more important thing. All right, so near the end of the show, let's end this show with the story of the week that makes me really happy and the story of the week that makes me really, really angry. So the story of the week that makes me really happy, Jagmeet Singh. If you remember Jagmeet Singh, he is the current leader of the New Democrat Party, that is our socialist party. Oh, Jagmeet. This is the man who kicked off his campaign run with a Jag meet and greet that was held in the wrong riding. Hilarious. So, and it didn't go much better from there. Jagmeet Singh then spent a year outside of Parliament in his top secret plan to do something so top secret that Jagmeet Singh didn't even know. But he's back in the news because there was a scandal where he basically kicked out a very popular NDP caucus member, Eric Weir, in Saskatchewan. Then people in Saskatchewan sort of wrote a letter saying the process was unfair. He was basically, there was not a jury. And then there was another story of a NDP female MP sexually assaulting a traumatized veteran, and he didn't do anything about her. So there's a lot of unfairness in the process. And people sort of wrote them. And Jagmeet Singh ripped on this group of Saskatchewan farmers and nurses for their privilege. And this is what I love. I love this use of privilege. It just makes me laugh because Jagmeet Singh has the gall to call these farmers in Saskatchewan privileged, which just means you're white people to Jagmeet Singh, because Jagmeet Singh grew up in a wealthy family. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? I was raised by two doctors. I didn't grow up working class poor. But I don't claim to lecture other people on their privilege. Jagmeet Singh went to a private school in the United States, was it an American private school, for $31,000 a year. That's twice as expensive as my private school growing up. He has 2 Rolexes. This is the leader of the Socialist Party. He has 2 Rolexes, and he's quoted as saying, I don't really like watches, but I just, it's like a Rolex. You can kind of like how that gold feel. This is the leader of the NDP, the working class man, with 2 Rolexes, because he doesn't like watches, but he just got to have a Rolex. He's in the fancy suits. I love it. I love everything about Jagmeet Singh. Please, we need more Jagmeet Singh. More Jagmeet Singh. Just more Jagmeet. There should be another Jagmeet and Greet. Jagmeet and Greet in my house every day, because every time Jagmeet Singh opens his mouth, it's hilarious and it's delicious. I love it. Keep lecturing farmers on their privilege as you went to a $30,000 private school as a kid. Hilarious. Jagmeet, you're right. All right, the story that made me the angriest this week. The CBC. Again, speaking of your tax dollars, the CBC has created a CBC site for kids by kids, run by adults. Is there anything wrong with a kids-geared news site? No, it's actually a good idea to have some child stories geared to children. But what are they gearing towards children? Well, there are stories on marijuana legalization. Again, I'm pretty libertarian on a lot of things. Am I happy that weed's being legalized? Yeah, legalize it. It shouldn't be government controlled. Let the stores sell it. We already have an infrastructure. But that's sort of a 19-plus thing. There should not be children's news about marijuana, because we shouldn't have children smoking marijuana. That's a very standard thing. There also shouldn't have your tax dollars going to fund kids telling them about marijuana. If this was a private company, they can do what they want to do and face the consequences, but there's no consequences for the CBC. This is your tax dollars teaching kids about marijuana. Also, there was articles on there about the notwithstanding clause, where they basically took an anti-Doug Ford slant, explaining these complicated situations to children. This is not appropriate, okay? If the CBC is going to be a left-wing pile of garbage for whatever it is, okay, we can live with that. But when they start gearing it towards children, that's crossing a line. You cannot do that. You cannot have children's content that is politically skewed and taxpayer funded. That is highly inappropriate. That's a gross waste of taxpayer money. It's not as bad as, funding terrorism, but this is the problem with our education and news system, where the liberal governments have been focusing not on education, but indoctrination. And this has gone under the radar, and you see it in our test scores declining, because our kids are getting less educated, they're getting more indoctrinated, and now this is leaking into the media. So that is the story of the week that made me very, very, very angry. Also, along with the other things. You just can't do that. All right, so in the last few minutes, I'm going to leave you guys with my final thoughts, and I think it's a good thing to sort of go back to the beginning and talk about these NAFTA negotiations, Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau. One thing I do not like, I don't like conspiracy theories. I don't like when conservatives take this rhetoric on the left that they're just George Soros puppets trying to destroy our country for George Soros and something new world order. I don't like that rhetoric. I don't. It's the same thing when the left says, "Oh, he's the Koch brothers. The Koch brothers run the world, and everyone does everything because of the Koch brothers." No, I'm not being paid by the Koch brothers. These are my opinions. I give my opinions because I have them. I have an ideology. I have political motivations, but I try and be pretty honest. Okay? I think anyone watching tonight knows that you got the news from a conservative slant, and I'm open with that. I have my own political motivations. I'm open with what they are, okay? I give you my news on supply management. I don't like it, and a lot of conservatives don't like it, when you're accused of being a Russian bot, or you're accused of being a Koch brother pawn, or something like that. By the way, I am a famous Russian Facebook bot. Hello, nice to meet you. My name is Vladimir. You must listen to me. But it's really, really hard to explain how the Liberals, Chrystia Freeland and Justin Trudeau, keep messing up NAFTA negotiations. I hate this rhetoric of, they really want to sabotage Canada. And I don't like going there. I think a lot of it is just ideological motivation. Like, Justin Trudeau, I think, is just a vapid ideologue. And with most ideologues, they're quite committed to the cause. They tend to want to purport their ideology because they're ideologically deluded. They think if we get to the utopia, right, if we invoke socialism and diversity and we bring all of Syria to Canada, that will make Canada great, right? We need 1 billion Syrian refugees, 4 billion Syrian refugees. I don't think he's thinking we need Syrian refugees to destroy Canadian identity because it must be destroyed for George Soros. He's probably thinking diversity is our strength. If we get more Syrians, that's more diversity, we'll be even more strong, and blah, 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 blah. But it's really, really hard to explain these level of mess-ups, especially when they're repeated over and over and over again from people who should be intelligent. I'm talking about, this is the 3 strikes on the NAFTA negotiations, all right? It's Chrystia Freeland, ripping Trump in Washington after accepting Diplomat of the Year during NAFTA negotiations. It's Justin Trudeau getting on TV saying we won't be pushed around, then getting pushed around after he had a good talk with Donald Trump. Then it's Christopher Freeland going back to the well, making the same mistake and sitting on that panel. And it's really hard to explain this. Is this just ideological delusion? It's really hard to explain like that, because do they really think that Canada is going to be a better place if they just stop their ideology of Trump being mean? No. And I think the most reasonable explanation here, maybe they're George Soros puppets from whatever. Yes, there's the picture of them meeting together. But I think the most reasonable explanation here is it's self-serving. This isn't so much ideological delusion or Canada hatred. It's the Justin Trudeau is setting up his 2019 or 2023 world tour. And I've been saying it for a long time. Justin Trudeau is sort of trying to market himself as, I'm the anti-Trump guy. He's really just, I think it's selfishness. They're trying to market themselves as the people who stood up to Donald Trump, not for Canadian interests, just so when they're out of office, they can go to Europe and tour around Europe as these brave politicians who are against Brexit and against Donald Trump, and that's what they're setting up. So is it George Soros puppets? I don't like that line. Is it ideological delusion? Maybe, but I think it's just self-serving. So that's been Uninterrupted for tonight. Join us again next week, same bat time, same bat place, and I need to sign off, but thank you so much for listening. Catch you next week.